games room. It's still full of mead, as you can see, but at the very least it's warmer out here, so I'm recording out here once more. I want to talk to you today about Warhammer TV. In particular, I want to talk about kind of filmed stuff that has come before and what might be coming in the future. So stay tuned, here we go. Okay, so this is sparked by Henry Cavill earlier this week is reported as saying that Games Workshop and Warhammer 40,000 in particular is his passion project. I agree, that's pretty cool, and it's nice to see somebody getting to live their dream, getting to let their geek flag fly, as it were. But it got me thinking about in terms of what will we see from the kind of Warhammer Amazon deal. I'm not going to kind of play a speculation of, ooh, what role will Henry Cavill play? I wonder. That's not what this video is about. What I want to talk about is what kinds of shows might we see, but also what have we already seen that has gone before. The earliest recorded Games Workshop video, for want of a better word, that I can find is the 1996 Inquisitor video. Now, I'll throw up a little clip of that in a minute, and I know there are going to be those who say that the Space Crusade advert that ran in the early 90s predates it. I am not considering the Space Crusade advert to be a full-on video, in much the same way that I'm not going to count kind of cutscenes from video games and stuff. In terms of something that was designed to be a narrative, visual presentation of a Warhammer universe product, Inquisitor 1996 is the first example that I can throw up there.
Today, you may help solve an important mystery for the Imperium.
How we may best serve the Emperor. This is the only mystery which concerns us, Admiral.
I am pleased to serve you again, Captain.
As am I, Admiral.
This was produced for Games Day. It was UK produced, and you can tell from the from the production quality shows it. Now, I'm not gonna cast aspersions. For what it is very cool. It is a product of its time. It looks like it could easily be an outtake from a Sylvester McCoy era episode of Doctor Who. In fact, I may be doing Doctor Who a disservice there. I think the production value on Doctor Who may have been somewhat higher in the 1990s. But in any event, it is cool. It is a story about an Inquisitor and a group task force of Dark Angel Space Marines engaged in thwarting a Chaos Sorcerer. And there is some funky for its time kind of CGI of a demon head popping out through a wall. There's some horrendous scenery chewing over acting. And it is about as well lit as some of the last season of Game of Thrones. That being said, it was nearly half an hour long. It is quite cool. There is a full-length version of it out there on YouTube for anyone who wants to go see it, and Snipe and Wib did a whole video about it, which is well worth checking out. But for what I can find, it is the earliest representation of Warhammer in a video medium, and as such, it presents, I guess, a blueprint for what we might see going forward in kind of the Amazon era. I mean, what would be really cool, kind of an Easter egg, would be in whatever they do for Henry Cavill's Warhammer project. Henry, if you're watching this, please, think of it as an idea. Referencing the events of the Inquisitor movie in whatever 40,000 thing they eventually produce would be a lovely little kind of shout out and callback. Let's move on. So, after 1996's Inquisitor, the next example that we were due to see in terms of video presentation is Blood Quest. This was supposed to happen in 2003. So this was, for anyone who hasn't checked it out already, Blood Quest is a Warhammer Monthly comic book story that started out briefly kind of in the pages of the Inferno magazine, and then when they launched their own kind of anthology style, 2000 AD style Warhammer comic, Blood Quest, written by Gordon Rennie, was an absolutely brilliant story, which I have serialised a couple of little bits in some of my earlier videos, and if people like that, I might go back and do the rest of it, because I did have a lot of fun doing those two little videos. But it is a story about Captain Leonatus of the Blood Angels chapter on a desperate quest to reclaim the sword and carmine that was lost in battle against the fell orcs. And there are other nefarious elements to the plot. Exile Films was the video studio that was contracted to start work on it, and they did actually produce a kind of a little trailer, which I'll throw a snippet up here so you can get a glimpse of the very rough, I admit, representation of what could have been. This was at around the same time that Games Workshop was just kind of getting into the production of the Lord of the Rings game. And although it's never been clearly stated by either Games Workshop or Exile Studios, who ceased business very shortly thereafter, there is a suggestion that their landing of the Lord of the Rings contract meant that Games Workshop dropped the intention of funneling money into the Blood Quest movie, and instead went all in on producing the Lord of the Rings game, which I've got to be honest, I think was a wise choice. The Lord of the Rings game is probably the best game that Games Workshop have ever produced, and I love it to bits, and I have extremely fond memories, and there's a Fantasy Fellowship on the shelf up there, which I will film a game with at some point in the future. But the suggestion is that Games Workshop intended to go back to making Blood Quest after the third Lord of the Rings movie had ended. But by that point, kind of time had moved on, Warhammer Monthly was no longer the big deal that it was, and there was decision was made to just abandon the project. Which is a shame, because again, I do love the Blood Quest story, and I think if they were looking for a story to do, I don't know where we are contractually with this, if they were looking for a story to do just on the Warhammer Plus in the same vein as Pariah Nexus, more on that in a minute, I think picking up the Blood Quest story and using the kind of the graphics technology that we have now, 20 years later, would be an awesome way to proceed. I would certainly, it would make me consider subscribing to Warhammer Plus. So yeah, Blood Quest 2003. That was the next kind of attempted production of a Warhammer TV show. It was eventually, the dream would eventually become a reality in 2013. A dream, maybe nightmare is perhaps the word for it, with the Ultramarines movie. Oh my God. If anybody has had the misfortune to watch this, it is one of those things where I can't see how they could have gotten it wrong. I mean, in terms of the casting for it, Sean Pertwee, John Hurt, there are some absolutely stonking vocal talents for this. The story's a brilliant story. The Ultramarines, I mean, they are the absolute flagship poster boys for Warhammer 40,000 at the time, at least. The film is just a little bit poop. And again, maybe it's just the fact that they made it 10 years too early, because here is a brief clip of it.
You are about to receive the honor of going into combat as Ultramarines. You must be steel. You must be doom. We march to face down chaos. storm a crag, and we shall know no fear.
And as you can see, the technology is just not quite there. It is like watching an extended cutscene from a late 2000s video game, which is basically what they made. It was, I mean, we should, in some respects, I suppose, be thankful that they stopped there and then waited a while until technology and everything else caught up with them before they made what we now have. So, scroll forward 10 years. Here we are now. It's 2024. We've had the last year and a bit of Warhammer Plus. And Warhammer Plus has brought us some brilliant content. The Pariah Nexus story, as I say, is probably my favourite thing that is on there. The fact that it picks up from the events of the stonking trailer that they produced for the launch of 9th edition. It's a brilliant piece of work. It's probably, I think, the best thing that they've put up on Warhammer Plus yet. That being said, there is, of course, the old Baelai piece that they produced, which was cool, and there is all kind of the banner report stuff that they do on Warhammer Plus as well. But in terms of a pretty damn good representation of the Warhammer 40,000 universe on screen, Pariah Nexus, I would say, is probably the best that Games Workshop have managed thus far. What does it mean going forward then? Well, at the moment, Warhammer Plus is kind of cranking out some content. And I think this is my one concern with Warhammer Plus, is it has some of the problems that streaming platforms have had, which is a lack of original content. It's got some, but at the moment they're kind of cranking out Pariah Nexus. They're cranking out the really, really good battle reports and Lore Masters stuff. But I wouldn't say, aside from the animation stuff and the really high quality battle report videos, and even those, they're not producing anything that is not already being produced by the various YouTube creators out there. I think the only thing I can say for them is that they've got some incredible talent working, doing their videos, doing people like Nick Baton, producing some brilliant battle report videos, and the kind of the Lore Masters series, it comes direct from the source, so they have access to everything that's in the Warhammer archives. They have access to all the artwork that they could wish for. The painting tutorials videos, again, they've got access to the Ever Metal Studio, albeit they are up and down about how they are producing those. What then can Amazon bring to the market? What can Henry Cavill and Amazon bring to the streaming services for Warhammer product that will appeal to a wider audience? Okay, well, so here's my thoughts. I would expect that whatever Henry Cavill is producing is going to be some form of live action 40k drama. Whether that is something like the Eisenhorn series, sort of dramatised, which would be incredible. Henry would make an incredible Gregor Eisenhorn, and they could do all kinds of cool stuff. I mean, anyone who's watched For All Mankind can see the clever stuff that can be done with kind of aging technology to make him go from the young Eisenhorn in Xenos through to the older, grizzled Eisenhorn that we get by the point of Malleus. Yeah, that is absolutely doable, and I think Henry would kick ass at that. There are a lot of people who talk about maybe using something to do the Horus Heresy style storyline. I think that might be a little bit hard for the wider general public to enter into compared to something like just a gritty sci-fi action detective drama like Eisenhorn. But what else can they bring to the streaming platforms? I mean, I'm presuming they're not just going to go, hey, we're just making one drama series. That is our contribution for all the money that we're presumably sharing with Games Workshop on this. We're making one drama series with Henry Cavill. Woohoo! I would hope that they are going to do more than that. And here are some suggestions of things that I would like to see, or I'd like them to think that they have considered. What do people like to watch? I mean, I'm perhaps somewhat biased with this. I live in my own little bubble. But Great British Bake Off, as an example. Baking shows, crafting shows, cooking shows, MasterChef. I'm not suggesting, hey, Warhammer MasterChef. That's not what I'm suggesting. But there has been a real resurgence in the last 10 years of people liking to watch people doing stuff. And we are a hobby about doing stuff. What I'm getting at here, I suppose, is something along the lines of the same model as Great British Bake Off, MasterChef, that type of competitive challenges linked to the painting and building side of the hobby, would absolutely, I think, be something that would work really well on a streaming platform. So certainly that was something that would be eminently watchable, but would also be quite approachable to a wider audience. I mean, hell, there was an entire show on Channel 4 about making pottery. People are actively gagging to watch other people. People are gagging to watch Gogglebox and watch people on Gogglebox watching people making pottery. I think this is an area that Games Workshop would excel at, is making that type of crafting show, and I think it's something that there is a real hunger for. What else, though, could Games Workshop do? Well, again, maybe I'm biased here, but I think that there is a return of kind of almost classic game show type stuff. I mean, I'm a big fan of The Traitors. I'm a huge fan of Gladiators, that is now back on BBC One. American Gladiators for those of you who are over on the other side of the pond, but yeah, we've got our own version here. Check it out on iPlayer, it's fun. I have fond memories of as a kid of shows like Scavenger Hunt and Nightmare that were fun. Crystal Maze, fun, over-the-top, silly, action-packed game shows, which lend themselves, I think, to the kind of silliness that Games Workshop is good at producing. And I suppose what I'm getting at here is, in much the same way as the overblown kind of drama and high-level practical effects of the tasks that they have to carry out in The Traitors, in terms of like just escape rooms and stuff that people enjoy going out and doing. Something of that ilk, but using the Games Workshop IP. So maybe it's something like Nightmare. Maybe it's we have a big green screen set up and you have teams going on and marching through the corridors of a derelict Space Hulk to get to the centre to dodge people in Tyranid costumes and CGI gene stealers and whatever. Whilst people in a separate studio yell, "Go left! No, I meant left! Your other left!" The person with the Space Marine helmet covering their face. Maybe I should make this. I think that would be quite a fun thing to do if I could get a green screen set up. We'll see. I don't know if my CGI skills are up to the snuff on that. I can barely use Photoshop. But something of that style would, I think, again, maybe it's a Crystal Maze style game show with a madcap presenter, someone dressed as a Harlequin or something, leading a team of people through a variety of tasks that are escape room-esque, set in the 140,000 or Warhammer Fantasy universe. I think that, again, this is something that would be eminently watchable and would be something that would make good use of the Warhammer IP. Beyond that, I suppose the only other stuff that they could, from my point of view, funnel their way into is more animation. Perhaps expanding on what they've been able to do so far with the kind of Brian Exer style animation and Black Talon and that kind of stuff. That obviously at the moment is serviced by Warhammer Plus. Now it might be just an example that Amazon just take everything that has thus far streamed to Warhammer Plus and make it available on Amazon Prime. And maybe that's part of the deal, is once it's done a year on Warhammer Plus, it makes its appearance on Amazon Prime. And that might be a way of drawing people into the kind of the story of Warhammer 40,000 and Warhammer Fantasy and all the kind of connected worlds. But the other thing I think that there has been a real resurgence of, and again, maybe it's my own personal tastes, is a real appetite for adult animation. And I'm not talking about kind of anime style, lots of blood and gore and crazy violence. But I'm talking about shows like Star Trek Lower Decks, Has Been Hotel, which I'm obsessing over at the moment. Things like Invincible, which Amazon have already got form, producing that kind of comic book drama, but in an animated style. I can imagine that, again, some of the stories that made their appearance in the pages of Warhammer Monthly, something like Darkblade, or the stories of Demonifuge, or maybe even it's the perfect way to do stories like Gaunt's Ghosts as an animated but adult series, using animation styles that are more than just computer animation, using styles that are more traditional, almost kind of drawn style looking animation. That is absolutely something that I think I would watch, and I think it's something that would be a bold move for Games Workshop and Amazon to produce. Beyond that, what else could we look at? Well, I suppose the only other thing that we could consider is whether there is a scope for Warhammer movies. And so far I've talked about series that Amazon and Warhammer could produce. The Inquisitor movie is, as I say, fairly low rent in terms of its product, and it was only about half an hour long. But is there scope for telling a story like maybe the first book of Gaunt's Ghosts, or maybe like one of the elements of the Horus Heresy story, or maybe just like the first Gotrek and Felix story? How amazing would that be to see Gotrek and Felix on the big screen? There is still a real kind of love of fantasy films and fantasy stories. Game of Thrones has proved that. House of the Dragon is continuing to prove it. The Lord of the Rings movies certainly proved it. The D&D movie, which was brilliant, proved that there is room for that kind of silly geekiness. Maybe that is the next step. Maybe it's something with the production values and casting ability of something like the Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves movie, but telling the story of Gotrek and Felix. Telling maybe the first stories from Troll Slayer, or picking up straight away in Skaven Slayer, maybe introducing the characters, and then launching into that first full story of them against Gracia Thanquol. I think it's something that the time is right for. Their appetite's for it. And as we are now kind of coming out of the writer's strike, and with the real kind of rush of content being produced, maybe it is the right time for a Warhammer movie. Maybe. I hope you've enjoyed listening to me waffle on about this, and yeah, please, if you have the spare time, go and check out some of the classics, like, in particular, the Inquisitor movie. It is a precious piece of our heritage and should be preserved, and I will say no more about it than that. Only time will tell what we actually end up getting from Henry Cavill and Amazon and Games Workshop. I hope you've enjoyed listening to me, though, just briefly kind of touching on some of the pieces of the kind of Games Workshop cinematic history, shall we say. And I hope you've liked listening to me spitball about what we might get going forward in the future. If there's any ideas that you've got, or if you think I've got things completely wrong, let me know in the comments down below. Let me know if we were to do a live-action Gotrek and Felix, who you would cast as the big two, who perhaps you cast as the vocal talent for Gracia Thanquol. I know who I'd like to see as the vocal talent for Gracia Thanquol. Maybe I'll let you know in the next video. Also, keep your eyes peeled, because coming soon, there will be a new podcast video series once a week featuring myself, Wargames Luke, and Hobby Waffle. I will throw links to their channels up in the kind of description below. Make sure you go over there and give them a subscribe. If you've not given me a subscribe yet, well, why not? Please give me a click of a like and subscribe. And I will be back next week with more random maunderings about the kind of heritage of Warhammer and my thoughts on something else from the Games Workshop universe. In the meantime, thank you very much for watching, and as ever, I will catch you next time. Bye for now.